The Clair Obscur Expedition 33 ending flipped everything on its head with one massive reveal, and if you walked away confused, you are definitely not alone. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down every hidden motive, every twist, showing you exactly what each ending really meant, complete with visuals to help you connect the dots and see the full picture, especially since everything was flipped on its head at the end. Now, before we get into the visuals, let's just get a quick recap of the big change that happened. And this was going to be after the fight with the Paintress, that the numbers on the rock is actually her attempting to communicate from the monolith where she's trapped. And these numbers are meant to represent the number of her creations that she can save each year. And the reason they're ticking downwards is because her oldest creations are the weakest and thus can't be saved from the power of Renor or the Curator. So the big twist was she's actually helping the expeditioners, and the bad guy is the person who's been with you your entire journey. Like, oh my God, but this is where things began to take a turn and started to get more confusing. So let's go ahead and jump into the visual representation to paint the picture and discuss motives and who did what. So this is my visual cheat sheet that I've been using to kind of remember who is associated to what action, whether that be in the real world versus inside the painted world with Verso's canvas. So in the top left, we have real Renor in the real world, who's known as the Curator in Verso's canvas. We have Alicia in the real world, who's reborn and painted into Maelle in Verso's canvas. We have Clair from the real world, which I have her a little bit smaller. We'll discuss a little bit later. And then we have the Paintress in Verso's canvas, who is Aline in the real world. Now, the top row are going to be the people who are outside of the painting. Obviously, Verso's missing, which we're going to discuss a little bit in a second. But then on the bottom side, we have the things that are within Verso's canvas. And so the first is going to be the canvas Dessendre family. And that's where we have the younger-ish looking version of Renor, Alicia, and Verso. And then we have all of the expeditioners who were created by the Paintress or Aline in the real world. So now that we've gotten these connections, let's get into discussing who did what. So when it comes to the Curator, he's also trapped the Paintress or Aline on top of the monolith. The big reveal is we find out that he's actually the one that's responsible for all of the gommages that happened, and he actually created the Axons, which we had to kill to make the barrier breaker weapon to reach the Paintress or Aline atop of the monolith. And I believe the reason that he trapped her on top of this monolith was to weaken her in order to eventually kill her and push her out of the painting. It's been stated that the Paintress or Aline is stronger than the Curator or real Renor, and so he trapped her on top of the monolith to weaken her each year, because the longer that she's in the painting, the weaker that she gets. And thus all of the expeditioners from the high age, the older ones, are going to continuously be killed as it kind of marches down to where she runs out of power after being trapped in the Verso's canvas for so long. So when talking about the Curator and Renor, we kind of discussed some of the Paintress and what she did, but essentially I'll reiterate, the expeditioners are going to be her creation, and she's also, like I said, ticking the number of how many of those creations she can save from the real Renor or the Curator. She's been in the painting too long, which is why people are going in Verso's canvas in order to pull her out, but she went into this canvas in order to grieve and feel closer to Verso, because Verso's soul, this is the last they have of it that she can kind of attach to and latch onto, as opposed to grieving with what the Curator thinks is a proper way to grieve. Now, when it comes to Verso in the real world, that's why he's not at this top list. He actually died in the real world attempting to protect Alicia in a fire. He saved her at the sacrifice of his own life. And so that type of suffering that was caused by his death is what sent the entire Dessendre family into disarray when it comes to grieving. The Paintress is going into Verso's canvas in order to grieve the loss of her son. Renor is going into Verso's canvas to release Aline, because now he's grieving the loss of his wife as well as the loss of his daughter with Alicia. Although she's not necessarily dead, she can no longer speak or voice anything. And so he's going in there to kind of reunite the family. Now, when it comes to Alicia in the real world, she enters Verso's canvas and is born and kind of painted over into becoming Maelle. And then we see her grow up in the canvas as Maelle. I mentioned that she was burned in the real world and can't speak and have these massive scars on her face, which is why the Dessendre canvas version of her has that portion of her face covered. They hadn't really elaborated on what mistake she made that got Verso killed, but it has been alluded to that it was a dumb mistake. And then lastly, we have Clair. and she's fighting what they're called the Riders in the real world, and I believe this is just setting things up for a sequel. And she helped Alicia hide Verso's canvas, so that way if they were able to successfully push out Aline, she wouldn't be able to re-enter because she wouldn't be able to find Verso's canvas. There is a secret boss tied along Clea that I think gives a little bit of closure for the Verso Clea storyline, but I would say that closure is not really the word that I'd put it. I'd probably say setting it up for a sequel to learn about what happens. Now, I feel like this ending in this cutscene has a lot of interpretations of it, but it essentially states that she's one of the strongest painters because she's able to paint over someone else's creation. And I feel like this is something that we're going to learn a lot more when and if we get the sequel to the game. And I feel like at this amount of success, it's inevitable for us to get it. Now that you have the visual representation of who's associated with who in the real world as well as the canvas world, let's begin discussing the ending. But before we get into that, if you haven't already, I really would appreciate it if you help me get this video to 100 likes and consider subscribing to the channel. But now that you've taken care of that, we're gonna move into the next section. Now let's discuss the two endings and what some people believe is the quote unquote true ending. I'll leave that up to you to decide which one is the true ending and who is morally right and who's morally wrong. I'm gonna do my best to not just sit here and just recap what you just watched. I will kind of give interpretations of what is happening. So if you haven't fully seen each ending, I'll have a link to that in this video description. So go check that out and then come back and we can discuss the ramifications of each ending without having to sit here and just recap in each detail exactly what you just saw. So as I began doing my research and writing my notes, I came across this super incredibly thought out comment that really put everything that I wanted to say in my interpretation to each ending in like very eloquent words that I know that I wouldn't even be able to say better myself. So I'm gonna reference that comment for majority of this section as I explain the meaning behind each ending. So if you hear me saying words that you're probably like, oh, we know Tag don't use these words, that's gonna be why, because it's probably being pulled from that comment. Now, when it comes to the ending, for starters, no matter what you choose, someone is going to be left to suffer. Siding with one side means you're gonna be denying that other side the agency, even if that ending might be for their own good in the future. So let's start with Verso's ending. Choosing Verso's ending means finally freeing him from the torment of immortality, and I believe that is what led his motivation to stop siding with the Canvas Dessendre family and begin helping the expeditioners trying to kill the Paintress or at least make it to the monolith. The entire canvas that we're playing the game in was crafted for him, and yet that Verso from the Dessendre family clone isn't even really Verso. It's just memories that are bound to him that he's going to echo and repeat. He's been trapped in this nightmare and haunted by the experiences that aren't his. So in letting him go, we grant him the autonomy to actually die on his own terms. Now, the Dessendre family in their grief built an entire world of sentient beings, a living painting, only to doom it to destruction because they have this unresolved trauma in the real world. And so you as the player, you're going to spend tons of hours growing attached to this world that's built in Verso's canvas, investing in meeting its people, fighting for their future. And just as hope seems to be within reach, Verso's going to be taking it all away. The canvas Verso is what I'll refer to him as. Choosing his side is to agree with the real Renor that this world isn't real and therefore it doesn't matter. So we need to pull all of the people who are in the real life Dessendre family out of it, so that way they can all grieve properly and begin to heal. Now with Verso's ending, the game is going to linger on each party member as their gamage because we are siding with him to rid this world. And you see Monoko or Esquille, who are also known as Verso's longest paintings, accept it with grace. They embrace his decision and they side with him and vanish. But then you have members like Maelle and Lune who differ. Maelle really was deeply committed to attempting to save the canvas, but she understands Canvas Verso's decisions and empathizes in silence. But then when we get that, it's contrasting with Lune, who just simply stares. She gives a dead, unforgiving stare and doesn't offer any comfort in his decision because once again, Verso lied to her. He betrayed the trust that you and the players spent so long building through gameplay and choices, once again after making a promise that he wouldn't do it, and so that's all she has to offer for him in his ending. Feel free to let me know your interpretation of Verso's ending, but now we're going to move into Maelle's. Now, the commenter believes that Maelle's ending is actually rationally quote-unquote the right one, and I disagree. I really believe that Verso's ending makes the most sense for everyone to heal, and forcing Maelle out of the canvas is something that's in her best interest, even though she doesn't choose it. But I'm going to go ahead and read the comment to kind of let him cook and hear a different perspective to see if it changes yours or my mind. when it comes to Maelle's ending being quote-unquote the right one. So in regards to Verso's ending, forcing her to leave the canvas gives her a shot at healing, a return to the world where she can maybe potentially reconciliate things with her family, which is why I think that with Verso's ending is the one that makes the most sense. And we catch glimpses of that possibly at Verso's funeral, but in doing so you're going to be robbing her of her choice. We thrust her back into pain, into her disability, denying her the agency that we fought so hard to restore, the agency that was stripped away from her father. Regardless of which decision you choose, Maelle's going to be losing a family either way. She's either going to be losing her blood family or the one painted for her. And we don't even let her have any say in her decision if we choose Verso's ending. So in the end, we're going to be sacrificing the entire world within Verso's canvas just in hopes that Maelle someday can become better in the real world. That being said though, I feel like it doesn't really make Maelle's ending any better. And the commenter also agrees by saying that if anything, it makes it more unsettling. And this is also the one that they chose. Myself, I chose Maelle's ending as well. Full transparency. Now, on the surface, it appears the most hopeful. Those who are gommaged are restored. We see Gustave come back to life, Sophie, and others taken by the Dessendre family's grief within Verso's canvas. They're all gonna get a second chance at life. Maelle also gives Verso the ability to age, granting him mortality, which is something that he's wanted his entire journey. My man just wants to die and rest in peace. And he's been given that mortality, so he's able to age and potentially live his new life, his final one, to the fullest. But that being said, there's still a power imbalance lingering as we see Maelle's ending unfold. The Dessendre family remains gods in the canvas, and that can't be undone. You're gonna see Verso performing on a literal stage for Maelle. So he's not getting to have the autonomy to make decisions. His fate is once again dictated by the will of another. And keep in mind, this is Canvas Verso who's being forced to live with these injected memories from the real life Verso within him, even though he knows they are not who he actually is. That fate was dictated for him, and once again, his final ending is going to be dictated for him with this mortality bestowed on him. But he's kind of being put on a stage to play the piano and, like, I guess for lack of a better term, just dance for Maelle. Now that is my interpretation of it along with the commenters. Feel free to interpret this however you perceive it, but he is able to live. He's just doing so under his control. And although Maelle may love him, he's never going to be viewed as truly an equal to her again because she has the power to paint the canvas however she wants. Now with the conclusion of this ending, we see the final image, and those are going to be Maelle's painted eyes mirroring exactly what we've seen of the paintress. So if you side with Verso, you're essentially validating Renoir's thoughts, but if you side with Maelle, you're going to be evoking Aline's delusion, and so it's kind of like the cycle continues itself no matter who you choose. Siding with Verso is going to fulfill the real life Renoir or the curator's vision by pulling everyone out of the painting, and then siding with Maelle is going to allow you to continue doing the same thing that Aline did, where she went into Verso's canvas in order to escape grieving Verso in real life. Now, the way that the commenter puts it way more eloquent than I did. They say, like her mother, Maelle retreats to dreams that she commands, and she's a gentle ruler, but still a ruler nonetheless. Her found family are still her creations, and that divine attachment might someday consume her as she's ordered to just make them and create them in the vision of her light of what she expects them to be. But with Verso's ending, it's a brutal dissection, cutting ties to preserve agency and chase a better future, even if that future is uncertain. And then that's contrasting with Maelle's, whose preservation through stasis, a comforting lie that denies evolution. So in either path you choose, they remain trapped by their inheritance of the thoughts from their parents. Despite defeating Aline in the Paintress or Renoir in the Curator, Maelle and Verso are unable to escape the legacies of grief that shaped them into be who they are today in Verso's canvas. Even when handed with the choice to free a parental influence, they remain bound to their past and doing what they were inherited to do based on ideologies that they eventually came to the same conclusion that their parents did the generation before. Neither ending is going to offer peace. Both are going to be laced with very disturbing implications for the other party, but they make emotional sense in that moment to the person that you chose. So although I might agree with Verso's ending, I do understand the plights and what comes with that and the effects that it has on Maelle. There's going to be no path here without pain. The Dessendre family's grief ensured that, and I think this is going to be what makes the sequel that much more amazing. So this is my interpretation of the Clair Obscur Expedition 33 ending, aided by a commenter. Let me know your interpretation in the comments down below, as well as what you thought of the journey overall. I'm curious how you think that a sequel is going to go with the whole writers versus the painters and Clea thing, as well as probably diving into the past of how Verso died in the first place, protecting Alicia. If you're looking for more JRPG content like this, feel free to check out this video right here, where I go into why Metaphor ReFantazio is such an amazing game. But thank you for your time, and I'll catch you in the next one.